Hello, everyone. So I need an intro. In the in the tradition of YouTube, where we say things that are important, I want you to like, share, and subscribe. Share this episode, subscribe to the channel, and as useful information, remember brushing your teeth is very important twice a day, as well as flossing, because I know that Baz Luhrmann already took the idea of sunscreen, so I'm going to recommend because I have hung around people that don't have proper dental hygiene, and I think it's a great thing. So welcome, Eric. Hello, everyone. Hello, they give the gospel of Jesus. Philip, Dragon, always great to see you. Welcome all. And Eric, very welcome back on this discussion about Mecca. How are you?
Great, great. Thank you so much for inviting me back on today. I look forward to this.
Right, great. And hello, Century Since. Yeah, Hanzo. So, what kind of intro do I need, Eric? What do you think do I need in terms of an intro?
Well, I'm going to tell you, if you go to the cross, I'm doing what do they call it? A shameless little plug for the Cross and the Crescent discussion group, which you should all subscribe to also, and look at the videos there. But if you look at the intro for the Cross and the Crescent discussion group, that is the standard. That is the most Islamophobic intro in all of YouTube, I have been told. Um, so if you want to look at what a good intro looks like, that is one of them. Um, and it can include some music. I know the music for mine is pretty good. The graphics are really good. It has a couple pictures of course, me, which makes it even better. But it's kind of hard hitting and shows a lot
Yeah,
of
actually, Connie offered to make one, and I contacted her, and I even invited her on to join us, and she said she wasn't able to. So I thought, that when before the show we would have a talk on Sunday, but she wasn't able to meet. Yeah, I prefer to just jump right into things than to have time taken up with intros and music, and you know, I don't
It
know. I
does
just
take a
keep it.
minute and a half. You're right, and she did make that for me. It actually got reported. I got reported for hate speech for it because it had a picture of Hitler meeting with Al Husseini, the Grand Mufti of Jerusalem.
Well,
Somebody
the
reported that
tubes don't
hate
like
speech.
that. The Facebooks especially do not like that photo.
Well,
So yes.
I had to change my intro because of that, which is it's actually shameless, is what or it's just it's disgusting, is what it
No,
is.
history doesn't look. I mean, as you know, at the moment, I mean, you see the two-tier policing that's happening in the UK, and of course, the special treatment that a certain jihadi demographic gets. I mean, this particular demographic has had more of their particular demographic join ISIS and al-Nusra than have joined the British Army. And I think one can fairly argue that extremism is the norm, is the mainstream within this community rather than the exception. Because everyone goes, well, actually, not all. In fact, a majority are very peaceful. It's like, uh, mm, mm,
Not
you
so
know,
much.
not so much.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So yeah, that's where we are. F. Palmer, Harry Tecklenburg, very welcome. Um, yeah, so guys, do drop your questions and comments in the chat. If you have any questions about last week's show, any comments on Mecca, we'll be happy to try and field them. And of course, I do appreciate that you subscribe to my guest. I just dropped his link in the channel. Of course, to this channel, we're broadcasting live on Rumble as well as on X. And yeah, and thank you again for all the support I've had for this channel. Much appreciated. It's a little slower now during summer, European summer. Things are really slow here. And also, I was very ill for 2 weeks, but yes, I am back. And Eric, what would you like to kick us off with in terms of Mecca?
Okay, so let me present my screen or share my screen here once again. I don't know why I don't have that already shared. But where we left off on Saturday, we were talking about Mecca, the Mecca being the hub of Islam. When we look at Mecca as a city, it isn't just any other city. Mecca is like a third leg of a three-legged chair. I know how you are with that other word, stool. It's a third leg of a three-legged chair, and if you take one of these out, Muhammad, the Quran, or Mecca, the whole thing comes crumbling down. You cannot have Islam without a
Right.
Muhammad or Mecca. You cannot have Islam without a Quran. You can have Muhammad and you can have Mecca, but you can't have Islam. And the same thing is true with the
Well,
city
you
of
can't
Mecca.
have Jesus without Jerusalem in the Bible, right? This is this they're trying to go for the same hat trick, aren't they?
They're all interconnected. You cannot have one. One cannot be believable without the other. And Mecca is the mother of all cities. It's where they pray 5 times a day to. They go to the Hajj for. It's where Muhammad had his initial revelation. So you have to have Mecca. And so what we did in the Saturday show is I gave a laundry list of reasons or things that are missing that are necessary in order for Mecca to have some type of historical basis for it. For an example, we know that there's no archaeology there. There's no mentions outside of Qur'anic literature mentioning Mecca up to the 7th century. The first time
It's
Mecca
not
is
on
mentioned,
maps. It's not
right?
in
Mecca is not
historical
mentioned
records.
until 741, and it doesn't appear on a map until 900. Mecca is not part of this trade route, and that's where I wanted to start with.
Yeah, it's not in historical records except within later Islamic records, but it's not in outside sources.
No, there's nothing there. As a matter of fact, all of the first four rightly guided caliphs, the Rashidun period.
Wrongly guided, please.
Correct. Okay, rightly guided caliphs. Well, I'm just using their terms. Sorry, but none of them are mentioned in any literature outside of Islamic literature. If you are sitting in Jerusalem in 638 and Umar is leading this army that surrounds the city and forces you to surrender the city to his armies, somebody within the city is going to write down this man Uthman and his army has surrounded our cities and forced to surrender. And that's enough people are going to write that kind of stuff down all across North Africa, into Spain, into Tours, France, all the way eastward into the Hindu Kush. Somebody's going to write it down.
Well, you know what's interesting?
You
If
should
you
find
look
it.
at the
You don't.
history, if you look at the history, let's say 200, 300 years before Islam, what you have is extensive written records because the Yemenis who controlled that region were very literate. They wrote, they were traders. They traded as far as India, past possibly China, but they went to Greece, they went to Rome. They were trading extensively. They wrote. On top of that, you had rock inscriptions that were rife in multiple languages, from Greek to Sanskrit. You pick the language. It was a smorgasbord. Islam comes along, and for the next 200 years, zip, nothing until afterwards. So either they took the time to, let's just say, erase the chalkboard, or well, that looks like it, because where did all the writings suddenly go from a fully literate culture to zip for 200 years?
Well, it isn't. Well, it includes that 200-year period that you're also, but also, Lloyd, I would also point out that if Mecca is supposed to be the place of the Kaaba, and the Kaaba was rebuilt, from a historical perspective, rebuilt by Abraham and Ishmael in 1900 BC, and it was a place of pilgrimage, you would have thousands, if not hundreds of thousands, if not millions of examples of inscriptions of people traveling to this Kaaba, whether it was a pagan Kaaba or
Right.
a Jewish shrine of some sort. You would have that, and there's nothing, and that's the point. It's absolutely absent of any type of evidence that would justify us believing that it existed in the 7th century. What was formulated after this, though, in the late Middle Ages, the 17th, 16th century, I can't remember exactly what it was, there was an attribution by a British scholar that said that Makaraba was Mecca. And we discussed this on Saturday, I believe. And what this did was it created this garbage in, garbage out type mantra, where people would say that Mecca.
Can I cover that? I actually have the slides right here. Can I go over that
Go ahead,
quickly?
knock it out. Yep, sure.
Okay, so we're going to briefly speak about, out of order and slightly without context, but Makoraba, the where. So the first identification of Makoraba, this word Makoraba, as Mecca, is traced to a man called Samuel Bochart in what's called Sacred Geography in 1646. Yet, no satisfactory derivation has been proposed to explain the difference between the two names. In other words, Mecca or Makkah and Makoraba. Now, the word is based on the southern Semitic root makrib, M-K-R-B, muqaribba, meaning temple, sanctuary, but also altar. Now, there's more to this word as well, and the culture that it comes from that will discuss. Bokhard used the root makatraba for Great Mecca. However, this is completely incorrect for the Arabic language. It is not Arabic. Now, for instance, myriad sources have included, of course, Ptolemy. And he correctly, and they mentioned in a chapter arguing that Kush was the ancestor of the Saracens, Kush meaning northeast Africa, being the ancestor of the Saracens, right? That the Saracens are the destitute of Sarah. So Sarah sent Hagar away with Ishmael because Ishmael was trying to hurt her son, right? And this was Abraham's son. What was the name of Abraham's son now again? Isaac, yes. Now, Bochert gave an account of Arabian geography. He correctly identified the location of the Hejaz and he named some of the towns there, including. Now, this is what the sources say. This is the typical standard narrative, right? The academic narrative, including Mecca, which in Ptolemy is Makaraba, Mecca Rabba, or Great Mecca. Now, this is his record, and this is the first recorded instance where Makaraba has been identified with Mecca. That is 1646. It doesn't go back to Ptolemy. Ptolemy did not identify Makaraba with Mecca. This is Samuel Bochert that did this, right? Makaraba, right, has been identified with what is known as Al-Mahabisha in Yemen. Now, Al-Mahabisha is where I mentioned there is a Saudi F-16 dropped 1 or 2 bombs pinpoint on the museum, which had all of this old history. Now, if you adjust Ptolemy's coordinates you'll correctly place the towns and rivers in South Arabia on a modern map. However, towns previously cited as locations of Makkah are discovered to be located elsewhere. It's been a bunch of guesswork. So here Ptolemy's original locations overlaid on a modern map. Mecca and Makaraba are marked in red. This was Makaraba here. This is Mecca. And of course you've got towns here in the ocean. So this was a bunch of guesswork. There's lots of reasons why the maps were all false. I'll stop there. I'll cover more of this later, but any comments on that, Eric?
Yes. When we're speaking of this, this is where the basis of this begins. And this is where we get into this trade route theory that people have used to justify the existence of a 7th century Mecca in contemporaneous history. And I ended the show or the presentation that we had on Saturday with this slide that I have up on the screen. Am I still sharing or?
I'll share in a moment. Just so you know, Al-Mahabisha in Yemen is about 720 kilometers south of Mecca. It's roughly around here, where you see my cursor right now. Right, so this place has been located. Now, notice, last point, then I'll give over to you again. Notice you mentioned that, now I've been to Petra. I spent a few days in Petra. I've been to Jordan. Petra is even drier. Petra is not as green as this. Now, Jordan can be very much like Europe. It's got beautiful forests and castles and can be like that, but Petra is very dry and hot. Whereas look how lush and green this part of Yemen is. And for instance, you can grow dates here. Now, supposedly dates were grown in Mecca. Well, Petra, apparently in these portions of it, you can grow dates as well as here. So this also fits the criteria for Mecca, according to the Quran.
Yeah, well, if you look at according to the Quran and according to the Hadith and Sirah literature, that this would have to fit because it says that you have fields with clay loam, with dirt. You have livestock. The Mushrakun were criticized for clipping the ears of their livestock. You have grass. You have olive trees. All of this is according to the Islamic literature. But if you look at Mecca today, this picture here that he has on the left, that's impossible. You have trees. Yeah. They used to clear trees. There's not a tree in Mecca. Why?
Yeah. And here's Al-Mahabisha. This is well south of Mecca.
Yeah, that's you said 700. That's about 400 miles, folks.
Yeah, and this is a massive, and this area was a massive trading empire. They were definitely on the trade. This is a massive trading empire, and this was one of the major pilgrimage sites. This was the major temple here. Yeah. So back to you.
Okay, so we ended with this this slide on Saturday explaining why Dr. Patricia Corona, in her book Hagarism or Meccan Trade and the Rise of Islam, disproved this Montgomery Watts idea that trade went across the western plateau of Arabia at the time of Muhammad, and that's why Mecca was such an essential, important place in Arabia. So when we look at this now, this map here and this slide that I have here was developed by Dr. J. Smith. I took one of his classes, and part of taking the classes, he allows you to he sends you the PowerPoint. So this is a slideshow that shows how the trade at the time of Muhammad went from east to west. It came out of the India, and then came up the North Arabian Sea through the Persian Gulf, out and out across the northern Arabia. Then this is part, of course, the Sassanid Empire, and in the north, of course, you have the Byzantine Empire. But that crumbled. Now you have to understand that this trade right here crumbled after the Muslims had swept eastward into all clear into the Hindu Kush. So the trade, according to Montgomery Watts, was diverted from the Persian Gulf and went up the west coast of Arabia, and it would be offloaded down here in Aden and travel up the entire plateau. Well, in his theory, it would come off the plateau and go down to Mecca here, 3,000 feet. And folks, if you know anything about traveling on these beasts of burden, going down off of a plateau, coming off of a mountain, 3,000 feet, and then turning around and going back up a mountain for no other purpose other than to go to a place that doesn't get but 4.3 inches of water a year is stupid. But people believe this for the longest time. Now what has happened is people have come in and they've basically figured out what has happened with this trade route theory. Now look, this is the plateau here. This is just to give you an illustration of where Mecca is located in relationship to this plateau. You see the relief here. This is 3,000 feet, folks. That is a good jaunt down the side of a mountain for no purpose. No economic purpose whatsoever. So what they've done is they've gone in and they've been reinvestigated what this trade route would have looked like. And instead of traveling up the west coast of Arabia along this plateau, it stayed on a boat and traveled up the east coast of Africa. There's 5 different spots here that it traveled, or where the people could stop, and you would have to offload the goods down here in Aden and then travel across land. It's much cheaper to transport that heavy or large amounts of goods by sea than it is by land. So this essentially debunks Montgomery Watts' trade route theory of why Mecca was such an important part, or was the center of this West Arabian trade. It couldn't have happened. So they've pinpointed these different points on the east coast. Come on, Kafir. On the east coast of Africa, they've gone in and they've done excavations, and they actually can show where these ports have existed centuries, even before the birth of Christ. And it's all the way up the east coast of Africa, extending all the way up into the Gulf of Aqaba and into the Gaza. So all of these places have histories demonstrable. This is the important part. Demonstrable histories behind them. So when you think about Mecca Jeddah does not have that port that's necessary to support trade coming in off of the ocean and into Mecca. So that idea of Mecca being a trade route or on this trade route is completely debunked by Dr. Trisha Corona. So if you don't have Mecca in the 7th century, what happens to Islam? It crumbles. Now, there's another thing that I want to talk about why there's no history in Mecca. And this is, I've alluded to it several times already, and I'm going to make sure that everybody understands this point. When you look at Mecca, old pictures of Mecca, what is the thing that stands out to you?
The rainforests.
Yeah, well, yeah, all of the lush green rainforests that we see there that we need to preserve all of those species that live in. No, there's nothing there, folks. Mecca is in a desert. Look at these pictures. These are ancient pictures. Well, this is actually a drawing, but if you look at ancient pictures of Mecca, there's nothing. There's nothing there. Here's a little a couple bushes, but it looks like this is water that they pulled together. You can't. And
Yeah,
that
but
I'm going to
those
explain
bushes
later where that water
identify
came
as
from.
a forest.
What's that?
Those bushes identify as a forest.
I identify as a tree. No, you're a twig, is what you are. But again, if you can look at, there's no vegetation there. What is the one thing human beings or animals have to survive? They have to have food. And so when we look at Mecca on any map, it's in a desert. And people do, and I was going to play this. I was reminded of this old video of a comedian by the name of Sam Kinniston.
Yeah,
That I was going
Tashfin
to have.
actually makes a good point. I've settled some of my offspring in a barren valley near your sacred house. Now, what is fascinating is, though, that in all of the Islamic stories of Hagar arriving there with Ishmael, there is literally nothing there. It is barren, there is no water, there is no Zamzam well, there is no city, and there is no Kaaba, yet near your sacred house.
And
Abraham builds it later. The whole story is totally contradictory and makes
there's
no sense.
it's not even consistent with Islamic literature is
Yes,
the problem, because it says that
yes.
Abraham sent her out and she was, you know her and Ishmael were dying of thirst, and they're 20 feet away from the Kaaba, for crying out. Like, come on, that makes no sense. But
In
we're
the
going to get.
world's oldest city, which is a major trade route. Yeah, I know, it's crazy. And they had to go on two hills to try and find some water and find anything. Yeah,
Why go on between the two hills too? That makes zero sense. Okay, so Mecca is in the middle of a desert. So, and I was just alluding to that. Sam Kinison makes a joke about sending U-Hauls to people who live in deserts. Instead of sending them food, sending them a U-Haul. Get out of the desert. Why? Because you're never ever going to be able to grow any food in the desert. You just need to move. And the same thing is true with Mecca here. Mecca, it's a desert. There's no water. And when there's no water, there's no food. There's no food, there's no people. Where there's no people, there are no cities. Where there are no cities, there's no civilization. When there's no civilization, there's no religion. It's that simple. Mecca does not have enough water to support any type of life, or a civilized life of any size. And it's supposed to have been large enough to uh, 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 draft enough men to have armies come out of it. And come on, you can't do that. When we look at the size of it, the size of the city itself, they've also often said, well, the Zamzam well has enough water to irrigate the land. Well, number one, there's no archaeological evidence supporting any type of irrigation going on in that area. Number two, if you look at the soil samples that are out there, there are no spores or anything in them that indicates that there was any type of agriculture going on. So that fails also. So
right.
the bottom line is that Mecca is built on a myth and a lie. But then again, as I said, they go to the Zamzam well. Were you going to say something, Lloyd? I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
No, no, no. I just agree with you. All of this. Yeah, the burden of proof would be on them to explain, to provide evidence. And of course, I don't think the Saudi Antiquities Authority is desperate to do that. I mean, they've plastered over just about everything in Mecca, built on top of everything, and they've never presented any kind of credible archaeological evidence, no artifacts. It's all
And I
missing.
have that slideshow that I was talking to you at the beginning that we can do at the end discusses uh, that very thought. Okay, so Muslims claim that the Zamzam well is the answer to all their problems, and they say that its dates clear back to Abraham. And you know what? It very well may date all the way back to Abraham. The only thing that you have to do is send somebody down into the well, and you don't even have to get, you just a lot of people think that wells are just holes dug and you drop a bucket down and you lift up. No, wells are normally things that people would walk down. You would have stairs that go down into them, and they would get, excuse me, buckets of water and then carry them out, not draw them out by a rope in a bucket. All you have to do is go down in the well, look for pottery, because people are bound to break the pots that they carry. They're going to drop them every now and then, and voila, you would have, and then date the pottery, and you'd be able to date the Zamzam well. They're not going to do that, and they will never do that because they know nothing exists there. Let's see here.
I know. So this means to put this one. This is no. This is no. Was that not Joni Mitchell? That was
Yeah, it was.
Paradise. Put up a pocket. Come
Right.
on, that was a different band. Which band?
Tore down the
was
park
that?
and put up there is like a song about the neighborhood in the town that she lived. I remember that. That's like 1970s stuff. Or no, maybe maybe a little bit later. Doesn't matter. Okay, they say that the well is inexhaustible, and it's supposed to be the cleanest and it's the purest water, despite the fact that people have died from
Big Yellow Taxi. Oh,
drinking
did she
from
write it first? Oh, so Joni Mitchell, Counting Crows. That was, yeah, I know the Counting Crows. So
when was that song?
I didn't know. Counting Crows, Big Yellow Taxi. I didn't realize it was a Joni Mitchell song.
Okay.
Interesting. Philip says there are dams, bridges, and reservoirs in Spain still in use, built by the Romans. Yeah, I've seen those. I mean, you can go all over Europe and you can find things like that date back to the Roman time. Yeah, that is true. You'll find bridges, viaducts, wells. I mean, there was one well in Oviedo that dates back to the Roman period, and the water's still flowing and people drink from it.
There's a viaduct that was built here outside of Mecca that I have a slide for that coming up here in just a couple minutes also. Okay, and then people bottle water and use it all. Okay, all these things are said about the Zamzam well. The problem with the Zamzam well is we don't really know a lot about it. Here's some old pictures from the Zamzam well from the 1800s, 1950s, people drawing water from it. And then when you look at the 1963 construction picture, that the Kaaba sits over here. This area around the Kaaba is a floor. The ground actually is about 10 feet further down. So it's kind of in the real ground is actually in a basement. So where this right here, what these people are walking on, that's a floor. That's not the ground. That isn't like they just put up a cement over the ground. And this is a floor, a subfloor that they walk in. And right here marks the spot where the Zamzam well is. Here's the Kaaba. Here's the Zamzam well. Now think about the story of Hagar and Ishmael dying of thirst. Here's the Kaaba. Here's the Zamzam well. Hagar and Ishmael are turned out by Abraham, and Hagar goes running in between these two rocks, these two high mountains.
Look for water.
Yeah. Look for water, yes. It says Safa and Marwa, and here's the Kaaba, and here's the Zamzam well. Houses probably existed someplace close to that, and she was probably running around in somebody's backyard, and they thought that she was I don't know, she was probably having some type of mental emergency or something. Who knows? But the fact is that when you look at the correlation of where the Kaaba is and where the Zamzam well is, that story of her running looking for water for Ishmael just does not hold water, literally. And now they have a museum to the Zamzam well. So here's the nagging problem. When they moved this well underground in 1963, they also dug the well deeper to see if they could get more water out of it. And the fact was that they couldn't. This Zamzam well, folks, only sits 21 meters. That's in American terms, that's about 20 yards from the Kaaba. And again, when you look at the story of Hagar and Ishmael looking for water, it just does not add up. So if Abraham lives next to the Kaaba, then why is Hagar? Think about that. Why is Hagar out there looking for water if she's been cast into the desert and she doesn't have any water? Why is she just 21 meters away from the Kaaba itself? When we look at where Safa and Marwa are at today, here's Mecca, of course. And let me see if I can get my mouse over here. Here's the Kaaba. And over here would be the Zamzam well. Now, Safa and Marwa, look at here, are 450 feet apart. This is Safa and this is Marwa, or vice versa. I can't remember which one. Safa itself is only 65 feet tall. It's just a big rock. It's not a mountain, folks. These back here in the background, those would be mountains. Something that's underneath this building right here, that would be a rock.
She couldn't see it because the trees were getting in the way. I mean, just look at that forest that's getting in the way. You couldn't see because of all the trees.
I have no idea what her problem was. But what I do know is that these are not mountains. These are nothing but rocks, big rocks. So that Hagar running in between these two big rocks looking for water, and the Kaaba sitting right here makes zero sense. There would have been houses right around this area if this story is to be believed. Right there's and they even have a building they built over the entire thing today, so people do not have to run back and forth between Safa and Marwa. Did I have the distance on there? Yeah, 2 miles. It'd be a total of 2 miles. But they don't have to do it when it's 127 degrees outside. So if the Hajj is like in the middle of July, like it was like last month, and you had almost 1,000 people die of heat exhaustion, today you shouldn't have that happening, at least during this part of the ritualistic practices of going in between the two mountains. It should not be that hot. And I'm thinking that eventually they might get one of those speed walkers built into there for the handicapped and people who have mobility issues. I would think anyway.
Right.
Okay, go ahead.
No, go on.
Okay, so in order to accommodate people going on the Hajj, knowing that Mecca in the 7th century did not have enough water to support almost any type of life within it, a canal had to be built in order to provide water to flow into Mecca from up on the plateau, and to accommodate those people who were going on the Hajj there. So when we look at this canal that was built, it was finished actually in 801, and it's about 21 miles long, 38 kilometers to European types and the rest of the world, except for us Brits and Americans. So it is kind of a engineering feat, and this remained the main source of water for 1,200 years for Mecca, and it would help accommodate the much needed water for all of the people going on Hajj. But since then, when you have, I think the last count that I saw or I heard was 17 million people went on Hajj. I don't know if it was this year or the year before. The amount of water necessary to accommodate that amount of people has drastically, exponentially increased. So what they've done is they built these desalination plants down in Jeddah, I believe they are, and they're pumping the water up to these huge reservoir tanks right above the city of Mecca. But this gives you further evidence that Mecca was not inhabitable. And in yesterday's slideshow on the Crossing the Crescent discussion group, I presented several different ancient historians and cartographers, explorers, notes that they had written that described that region as being uninhabitable, not and cannot be this mother of all cities. So they said it was uninhabitable, and being uninhabitable means it was uninhabited, meaning that there was no people there, meaning that there was no religion there, meaning that Islam is false. And this is contemporaneous pictures of the well itself, what's left of it anyway. Now there are
The
four
aqueduct,
main.
you mean?
What's that?
Of the aqueduct.
What about them?
No, you said pictures of the well. What's
I'm
left?
sorry. Yeah, the aqueducts. Yeah, sorry. Yeah, this is what is what's left of them. And as I think it was one of the wives of the caliphs that actually was in charge of getting this thing built. If I'm not, there's something with one of the wives of the caliphs was involved in this, and I can't remember why. Maybe they named it after her. I don't know. Somebody probably could fact check me on that one. But I just remember when I was researching that something about one of the caliphs' wives. Okay, so the Muslims, we can sit here and say all we want that Mecca did not exist, and they're not going to believe it. And we were discussing prior to the show that I personally believe it's because there's some type of supernatural spiritual blindness going on there. Well, they'll just absolutely refuse to believe any type of evidence that you present to them. So what they have to do is they have to come up with what we call rescuing devices. And the four main rescuing devices that I have seen is, number one, the adage that absence of evidence is not evidence of absence. We spoke extensively yesterday about Ptolemy and Makaraba, and Lloyd hit on it at the beginning of the show here, how that one fails miserably, but we're going to touch on that again real quickly. Diodorus talked about a terapole that all Arabs went to. So that's another rescuing device that they throw out there. And they also throw out this idea that Psalm 84 is somehow speaking of the valley of Mecca, when it says in the Bible it's the valley of Mecca. So let's just go ahead and handle these real quickly, one by one. The idea that absence of evidence is not evidence of absence, and I agree that this is an absolutely true statement. Just because you
But
don't
then
have
why do
evidence,
Muslims keep asking us, "Where's your evidence for Jesus?" So you should just use the very same arguments right back at them. The very same apologetics. We should just repeat it verbatim back to them.
well, where's the evidence for Jerusalem? Where's the evidence for Capernaum? Where is the evidence for? Well,
Yeah, I know it, but I mean, they'll say it anyway. That they don't care about facts.
right? Yeah. Well, and they can throw it back at us all they want, but at least we have answers. I mean, that's probably the biggest difference. And the premise of this is just because you've looked for evidence and not have found any does not mean that there isn't any evidence supporting your supposition. It just hasn't been found yet. And I agree with that. I honestly do agree. Like Noah's Ark. I believe Noah's Ark was an actual boat that was built, 4,000, 4,500 years ago because of a worldwide flood. Have we found Noah's Ark yet? No. So therefore, Noah's Ark never happened. Well, that's not true. There's not going to be much left of a 4,500-year-old boat. But I could make the argument that absence of evidence is not evidence of absence, using that supposition. And people have gone out looking for Noah's Ark for hundreds of years. I mean, this would be the archaeological find of all time if you could find Noah's Ark. But here's the difference, and this is where this argument for Islam fails. And it's because Islamic scholars are not looking for evidence. As a matter of fact, what they're doing to the evidence that exists in Mecca today is they're destroying the evidence. And we alluded to that, and I'm going to show some slides on that here in a little bit that show you how they are destroying the evidence. It is one of these, and I'm not a big conspiracy theorist type guy, but this is conspiracy in your face, destroying evidence that they know that does not exist, and preventing people from taking or exercising the ability to go in and excavate that city, or at least the ancient parts of it. They're cementing over it. So, when you try to make this argument, it's not true because they're not bothering to look for evidence. And they say that, well, there's not supposed to have any excavations going on in this the holy city of Mecca. We just must take it on faith that it existed. Well, you can take it on faith, gunfighter, if you have some other type of corroborating evidence. And the fact is that they don't have any corroborating evidence. Mecca has been completely cemented over. They have all of these towns and cities that were nearby, or all these buildings that supposedly existed, they're all gone. They were completely torn down and cemented over. When you look at Najran, you have all kinds of archaeological evidence dug out of that hamlet compared to Mecca. If Mecca is supposed to be the mother of all cities, Najran is just like a footnote. But yet we have all kinds of evidence supporting the existence of Najran and none supporting
And
Mecca.
Najran is not even one of the oldest cities. It's not even on the list of the oldest cities in Saudi Arabia.
No, but it does have a history though, and that's the
But the truly antique, the truly old cities in Arabia, in Saudi Arabia, have evidence for them, and that they have populations going back to 1000 BC and
and you
such.
showed a map on that on Saturday. If
Yeah.
people go back on
So
show
it's
on Saturday,
interesting that you can find proof of population living in various places all over Arabia except for Mecca,
why is that?
because someone's telling a lie.
Somebody is lying about it, and I give you one guess who it is. And here's the other nifty little fact that goes along with this: you cannot get better conditions to preserve archaeological evidence than what you have right there in those sands. The dry conditions, things do not deteriorate. This is why you can pull. This is why we get so much manuscript evidence. Ancient manuscript evidence comes out of that region of the world. Why? Because of the dry conditions. And this excuse is students saying, "Well, my dog ate my homework." No, you just didn't bother doing it. And the fact here is that no, you don't have any evidence to demonstrate that this existed. Why? Because you haven't even bothered looking. And you won't look because if you start digging around out there, you're not going to find anything, and you're going to have to come up with some type of rescuing device why nothing is there. Maybe God removed it or something. But if you look at Mecca today, and this is an old picture of Mecca. I'm not sure how old this one is, but all of this has been developed right here. This has all been built. But when we looked at this, if you look right here, this right here is ground level. Right here. This is ground level. Look how much further down you had to dig in order to build these buildings.
Yeah, those foundations will reach down 30, 40 meters.
Sure. Yeah,
because they're going to put car parks as well. They'll put car parks underground. So
and right up
I mean,
here. Go ahead.
No, so they may have various car parks. They may have whatever under, or just the pillars, but they'll have engineering sections. What have they found? What have they presented to the world? That's proof of the age of Mecca.
Nothing. Here's the Kaaba right here, folks. And look what they've been digging all around this structure right here. If this is the Kaaba, and this is supposed to be the city surrounding this Kaaba that Abraham and Ishmael rebuilt 4,000 years ago, this right here should be nothing but a treasure trove of archaeological or artifacts that would have been discovered. Layers and layers of artifacts would be discovered right here.
Europe has old towns that go back 1,000 years. I mean, just I can walk down the street, there's an old town going back 800, 900, 1,000 years. Whereas, where is the Mecca old town? Where's the old city? Haven't they kept any of the old architecture, the old houses, old buildings, the old school, the old library, the old little postmaster's house? None of that? Nothing?
If they existed, they didn't exist, but if they had existed, they are in the back of a dump truck that had transported all of that remains to a dump miles outside of the city. That's if they existed, but they didn't exist, because if they had existed when they were undergoing this $21 billion building project to build all of these buildings, They would have done like every other civilization on the planet does, and that is if they dig and they find any type of artifact, um, they stop digging, they unearth it, catalog it, write about it, peer reviewed journal, like the rest of the world does, and then they continue
Think
building.
if this is and they claim, look, they openly claim this is the world's oldest city, that civilization spread out from this spot. Now, shouldn't they have ready proof for that assertion? I mean, this is gaslighting on an enormous scale.
Exactly right. That's exactly what it is. They're telling us what we need to believe. And they said that this is the oldest city. This is where Abraham. I mean, all of these things they tell us are nothing but a lie. And
And
if
this is
they
true.
if they insist that it's not a lie, all you have to, I mean, 2 words: prove it, prove it,
And being
present
a
your
religious
evidence.
site, as Wizard's Wood says, it's strange any buildings were erected or even allowed to be built. Surely, it's true. I mean, on the most important religious site, are you going to start building hotels, casinos, spas? You know, maybe not. But
Well, I will tell you something, Lloyd. These rooms that are in these buildings right here during the Hajj are going for about 10 grand a night. That's how much it costs people to stay in those things. It's in the clock tower, and well, maybe that was in the clock tower. I'm sorry. Okay, then the clock tower. I know they were 10
right,
grand a night, but other rooms throughout the city are going to cost you at least $1,000 a night, and that's just if you're sleeping in a bed with 20 other people in the same room. It's absolutely obscene, the amount of
yeah,
money that they make off of this. When we think about having to sacrifice animals and having to pay for, I mean, it's just the amount of money that it takes to go on a Hajj today. I mean, it's got to be at least 50 grand. You're going to drop 50 grand getting there, eating, buying everything that you need to, renting your room, and I don't know how people do it, but there again, I'm just an average school teacher who lives on a pension now.
yeah. No, I mean,
For that
it's
kind of
really,
stuff.
it's at this point, it's a joke. I mean, they should just come clean, and scholars should press them on this. Academics should press them on this. Museums should press them on this.
They have.
Archaeologists
They
should.
have pressed them on it, and they said we are not going to do archaeological work on a holy site, meaning that we are not going
Okay,
to.
fine. So the Kaaba's a holy site, and the I don't know the 100 square meters around its whole, whatever the case may, or 100 meter radius around it. But still, it's the world's oldest city. It's
But
been populated since 9 million BC, right? It's been an active trade route since 5,000 BC. They were selling Blaupunkt stereos, Telefunken wireless radios. They were selling Samsung Bluetooth earphones. I mean, since way back in the day. Now, I mean, you'd think that maybe I don't know, 2 stones throw from the Kaaba, you'd have something. Not just I can understand. Fine, don't dig up the Kaaba, which they did anyway. But yeah, nothing, not even close.
do you know what the oldest artifact that they have dug out of there that they've gotten from Mecca?
A brass button from 1963.
Not you're close. No, it was a sandal or a part of a sandal from the 12th century. That's the oldest artifact that they've gotten out of Mecca, the 12th century. So the bottom line is that this whole thing is nothing but a joke. So the absence of evidence is not absence, or the evidence of absence is not the absence of evidence. Ptolemy and Makaraba, you've already beat this horse to death, so I'm not going to uh, expound on it. If you want to go over to my channel, I did a show on it yesterday. A couple things about Ptolemy. He never visited Arabia. If you look at his map, he places Mecca or Makaraba east of Mecca when Mecca is south and west of
Yeah, they're
Medina.
different languages. The words mean something different. And Ptolemy's map coordinates once worked out. It's a completely different location,
Yeah,
and not north, south, not Petra, Yemen.
that yeah, it's that it is actually that far south. When we look at the differences in the names, the etymology of the names, Dr. Patricia Corona talked about this and how they're just in Arabic, they're two completely different words, and to try to associate just because they sound similar in the English language does not mean that they're similar words. And here's what she says: the plain truth is the name of Makaraba has nothing to do with Mecca, and the location indicated by Ptolemy for Makaraba is in no way uh, dictates identification
Yeah.
of the two. So when we think of Makaraba, also it's not in any other writings after Ptolemy. So it's just this one and done type thing.
And just to reiterate, I mean, the claim that Makaraba is Mecca is from a 17th century claim by Bochart in his geography. So that's from the 1600s. I just want to show something here. Makoraba, right? The words ma and the word mu are very similar in Islam. A Muslim is someone who is subservient to, someone who gives allegiance to Islam, right? Makoraba is easily derived from Mukaraba, right? The Mukaraba were priest kings who served the will of Allah, the god of the Kaaba, who was called Al-Makkah, right? So Mukaraba, Makoraba, right? Muslim, Mukaraba, priest king. So if you think of it, Muhammad was a priest king. So, and these are warrior priest kings. They were required to make war on a regular basis, make jihad on a regular basis. This is the Yemeni tradition. So this is something that is well known. I just want to mention here, this is Hiran. Hiran is also, now it's very similar in name to Haran, which is Haran, the place in Turkey, just across the border, which is also one of the moon worshipping sites I've discussed in the past, also known as Al-Mahabisha, right? Of Mahabisha, belonging to Habisha, right? Habisha, Mahabisha, belonging to Habisha means effectively belonging to Ethiopia, a place that belongs to Ethiopia. Belonging to, of Mahabisha, Habisha, Iran. But they speak of the Sabaean moon and war god Al-Makkah, right? And then Al-Makkah's successor god was called Allah. So they started to call Al-Makkah Allah, right? And notice here, in terms of the similarity of these religions, he has granted him, so this is an AD 250 inscription and this is about the Mukaraba, right? He has granted him to return with the spoils of 32 slaughtered enemies and with booty. Now, this is something that's in the Quran. This is something the Muslims did. This is something that these Yemenis, these pagan Yemenis who worshipped the moon god Al-Makkah, and the moon god was always a war god, right? It was always a moon and war god. Now, a 1st century BC inscription, Rabib Yazam of the tribe Akhraf of Hiran has dedicated this inscription to Al-Makkah of Hiran. That's Hiran, that's Al-Mahabisha, that's the original Makoraba, because Al-Makkah has granted him trophies, spoils, and captives. Now you've got another one, Karib-il, that's another word that's related there, I won't go into that now. Control of the incense root and crushing the kingdoms of Alsan and Nashan. So you've got this cultural overlap, you've got this warlike aspect, and Al-Makkah, the god Al-Makkah of Hiran, of Makoraba. So the god of Makoraba, right, the Allah of Makoraba was called, well, Al-Makkah. So just a couple of interesting... Oh, and let me mention one more thing, talking about paganism. This is the chronology of ancient nations. The Arabic text, right, an English version of the Arabic, At-Ar al-Baqiyya of Al-Biruni, called Vestiges of the Past, right? And this was written in 390 AH, 81,000, but this is one of the scholars of Islam. And let's just read what he says here. And he says, thereupon Abraham, seized by wrath, broke the idols in pieces and left their community. But after having done it, he repented and wished to sacrifice his son to the planet Saturn, it being their custom to sacrifice their children, as that author maintains. Saturn, on seeing him truly repentant, let him go free with the sacrifice of a ram. Now, don't forget, the Muslims claim that they follow the religion of Abraham. Now, if you continue that thread, they rejected Christianity and Judaism, and they say that they worshiped the religion of Abraham before he started to worship Yahweh. And, of course, that means he worshipped Saturn here. Saturn is Al-Makkah, right? Abdal-Masih bin Ishaq al-Kindi the Christian, in his reply to the book Abdullah bin blah blah blah, relates to them that they are notorious for their sacrificing human beings, but that at present they are not allowed to do it in public. All, however, we know of them is that they profess monotheism. The rule of the universe they attribute to the celestial globe and its bodies. Now we're talking about an astronomical religion, which they consider as living, speaking, hearing, and seeing beings. Don't, there's the stars, because if you look at Islamic theology, the stars are living souls, right? The stars are souls, the stars are alive in Islam. And the fires they hold in great consideration, just like Zoroastrians do. One of their monuments is the cupola over the mihrab beside the Maksura in the great mosque of Damascus. And the word mihrab will go back to Al-Makkah, will go back to Makoraba, will go back, because Makoraba and mihrab, there's a link and a connection there. But notice this is talking about Saturn and paganism, and it all comes together in one big soup. But back to you, Eric.
Yeah, where did that come from again? Can you go back? What was that book? What was the book that Ancient Chronology of Nations? And when was this written?
81,000 roughly.
Wow.
And this is a Muslim author. This is Al-Biruni. So yeah, it looks like the Muslims may well have been worshipping to Saturn or something. Makes one wonder.
If Muhammad was a pagan at one time, worshipping the idols in the Kaaba, why not? Why shouldn't Abraham? I mean, he's just following the sunnah of Abraham, it looks like.
Yeah, exactly. And Abraham was worshipping to Saturn. Yeah.
Yep, another pagan. Pagan is as pagan does. Okay, so the next one is Diodorus. Diodorus and the temple. Now, when we look at the writing of Diodorus was a Greek writer. I can't remember exactly when he lived. Seems like it's the 2nd or 3rd century AD. But he mentions a temple that all of the Arabs worshipped at. So they're assuming that this temple is going to be, or they're going to, of course, assume, and they're going to assert that this temple is the Kaaba in Arabia. The problem is that Diodorus was referring to this people group here, the Banazamenes. I can't pronounce it, but this people group that he's referring to are 500 miles north of Mecca. They sit adjacent to the Gulf of Aqaba, which is the right northern tip of the Red Sea. And I'll show you a map of where they're located here in just a second. And this is where Dan Gibson has come up with his theory. I don't know if you call it a theory. Well, I guess you could call it a theory as to where Islam originated to begin with, because he said that there are so many references out of the 65 different geographical references that are made in the Quran. 54 of those references deal with people from up in the region, the people of Talmud, Ad, and Midian, which are way north of what is now Mecca and Medina. So that corroborates somewhat of what he said. But to say that Diodorus is, again, this is a rescuing device for the Muslims. But the people group, the Banazamenes, is clear up here. And right here is the Gulf of Aqaba. Way up here is the Gulf of Aqaba. Down here is Mecca, right here. So here you have Diodorus's temple where all of the Arabs are worshiping. And right here, you see this city right here? That is pretty consistent with a lot of the geographical locations that are described in Islamic literature. And so right here, here's Mecca. Right here's Mecca. Here's the Gulf of Aqaba right here. And this is where that region, that temple that Diodorus was mentioning. So right here, this is about a 500-600 mile jaunt. And anybody that can travel that distance in that heat, you have, and do it every day, you have my congratulations. You're pretty hua. And the last one that I've run into before is Psalm 84 in the valley Mecca. And I've had some discussions with Arab speakers about taking the M or the B and then converting it to an M in the Arabic by just adding a little squiggly line at the end of the first letter, and I can see how that is true. But listen, when they say that Mecca, mentioned in Psalm 84, is actually Mecca, listen to what Psalm 84 actually says here. When it's mentioned in the Quran, it's in chapter 30 or chapter 3, verses 96 and 97. This is where they say that Mecca is Mecca. Now, keep in mind, Psalm 84 was written by King David 700 miles away from what is now present-day Mecca, and that would be 1,600 years after Muhammad, or before Muhammad, I'm sorry. And it begins with, how lovely is your dwelling place, Lord Almighty. Does the Lord dwell in the Kaaba according to Islam? And the answer is no. So how can you say how lovely is your dwelling place if this is talking about Mecca? You can't. Verse 3, it's a place near your altar. Is there an altar in the Kaaba? No. The dwelling place of the Lord is the temple, the Jewish temple. The altar is the altar inside of the Jewish temple, not in the Kaaba. Blessed are those who dwell in your house. I guess you could make some type of allusion to the rock inside of the Kaaba in some type of sick, twisted way, but it still does not pertain. And then in verse 5, this is where they really cling to this one. Whose hearts are set on a pilgrimage. Right there, you see it right there. Lloyd, you're missing it. Right there, where it says a pilgrimage. So this has got to be the Kaaba. Why? Because people made a pilgrimage to the Kaaba. They would not make a pilgrimage to the Jewish temple, except 7 or 8, 9 times a year they would make a pilgrimage. So,
yeah,
but besides that fact, it says pilgrimage, and that pilgrimage, folks, would be 1,500 miles. Nobody makes a pilgrimage of 1,500 miles. I'm sorry. Well, today they might, but at this time when you would travel with Pete and Harry, your left and right foot, I don't see that happening. Verse 6, they make it a place of springs. The autumn rains also cover it with pools. Again, Mecca gets 4.3 inches of rain a year. Now, I have seen some flash flooding going on in Mecca, where rain comes tumbling down off of the plateau and pouring in and running through Mecca. I've seen that, but you do not get annual rainfall where you're going to have pools of water sitting in the city for people, cool pools of water sitting in the city for the people. And then verse 7, they go from strength to strength till each appears before God in Zion. Zion, when it's referring to a location in the Bible, refers to the hill of Jerusalem. It does not refer to Mecca. So when we look at Psalm 84 and they try to use Psalm 84 as some type of reference to Mecca, it's a lie. What they're doing is they're taking it completely out of context and ignoring the majority of what that psalm has to say. So conclusions. When we look at Mecca, it's the foundational place of Islam. It's where Muhammad got his revelations. It's where they bow to 5 times a day. It's where they perform the Hajj. It's the earliest and it's the most important city in mankind. When we look at Mecca today, it does not hold up historically, geographically, to anything in the Bible or in the Quran itself or the Hadith literature. And when we look at its descriptions, it says it has fruit trees, grass, grain, streams. It's in a desert, folks. It has none of these things. It doesn't have soil. It can't grow anything. And when you look at it being the greatest city in history, it's only referred to once by name in the Quran.
Yeah, but that it's not. It's called Bakka. Can I just unshare my screen again?
Go ahead.
This is we're going back to the to Yemen to the Himyarites and Queen of Sheba, Saba, and the god Shin. Right, the moon god Shin, the Babylonian moon god. Shin was also known as we mentioned, Makkah. You'll see here Al Makkah, the moon god, and his symbol was the Bakka symbol, right? The Bakka symbol, which means glory be to Allah. So this here is the Bakka symbol here, right? This little squiggly line is the symbol to Al Makkah. This is the Venus moon couplet. You would know it as the Islamic crescent and star, and you'll see it here on these coins, the crescent and star, as Islam loves to call it today. Then you've got the Bakka symbol, meaning glory be to Allah. Allah was Al Makkah. Al Makkah was the Allah. Allah was Al Makkah. Makkah was Allah, and who was also known as the Babylonian moon god Shin. So the symbol meant glory be to Allah. Here you've got other examples of the same coins with the crescent and star, and right, and you can see it all over these coins. These were pagan coins, right? And so these are everywhere, right? You can see here the name Shin, the moon god Shin, right? Who was also Al Makkah, who also was also Allah, who was also the moon god Shin. So you've got these here, and then of course, I just had to very quickly go through this, but let me just bring up Bak here, and notice you'll find a similarity. They mentioned the god Bacchus, Baka, and Bakka, right? So you've got Bakka that's mentioned in the Quran, and according to this source here at least, there is a link. Let me just go back one. There's a link here to Bacchus. Bacchus is the god of wine, I think the Greek god of wine, the Greek god of fornication, partying, having a good time, also god of fertility or something like that, farming, growing. But you can have a look it up. But also that's the same god that at the Olympics, the blue guy, the half naked or mostly naked blue guy, that was Bacchus. So you've got Bacchus, Baka. I mean, that is not a coincidence. And when we start looking at that, so they speak here of, we just spoke of Saturn, and once you start going through this, right, you're going to start finding all sorts of links. Baka symbol, which is Al Makkah symbol, which is the Baka, which is Bacchus, which is pagan gods, and you start going through this and you start to find that, yeah, it just all links back to paganism. It all links back to the ancient Greeks. It all links back to ancient religions. And the Yemenis were mixing different pantheons. And yeah, it's just all a bunch. It's all weird. Any comments, Eric?
Well, it looks like a bunch of borrowing and the amalgamation of different religious beliefs into Christianity, and this is and it was unenforceable by the Christian church at this time because their reach did not extend that far into Arabia. So this is where you
Yeah.
have a lot of Gnostic beliefs and heretical beliefs that
And
take
notice
root.
it says here Baka, Bakka, Bakat, Mukka, or Makkah, and Makkah all refer to the same location. Now that was the deity in Makaraba, Al Mahabisha, right, in Yemen. And you have Dionysus, Bacchus, Osiris. See, it's all the same shared pantheon. And Bacchus and Dionysus, right? So there's all of these links to these
I think of who
pagan.
Dionysus was. I mean, that's the god of where it's a perversion. And this is where the men cling towards this because instead of identifying with their creator, they identify with themselves and their own perversional lusts that come out. So see this association with with Islam really is not it's not surprising. It kind of makes more sense, as a matter of fact.
Yeah, I mean the Arabian pantheon was exactly the same as the Babylonian pantheon, but also they were borrowing elements from the Greeks and Romans. They were trading with them, so that information flowed from Europe at that point straight down to these guys. Yeah.
Yep, a little bit here, a little bit there, sprinkle a little bit of monotheism, a little bit of walking around a building in the middle of a desert 7 times, kind of like walking around Jerusalem. I don't know, throw in a couple rocks and voila, there you go. This is what you get. Yeah. And I'm not even going to go there with that Muhammad being a
Ah,
myth.
the astronomer says, I talked to Dr. MacDonald, an expert on Arabic epigraphy. He says Mecca is never mentioned in any pre-Islamic inscriptions. We have tens of thousands of inscriptions from ancient Arabia. Well, there you go. It's absent. I mean, this is evidence of absence, and that is, the absence of evidence is evidence of absence. There was no Mecca. I mean, so you've got this mixture between a name of a place which seems to have originally been the name of a pagan deity, and so the place of Al Makkah, the deity, just became the name of the place, Makkah. So yeah, and the people doing the trading were the Yemenis, not these Arabs at the time.
Well, it starts in the south and heads north right there in Aden. Okay, let's see here. Geographically, the Quran places almost all of the 65 referenced areas to the north. Talmud, Ad, and Midian are between 600 and 1,000 miles out of place. A couple other points here. Arabic word endings used in the Quran do not come from Mecca, but they're from Nabatean Aramaic, which explains why the initial Kaabas pointed north instead of in Mecca. Mecca's the place where all these prophets are supposed to have been buried. And after looking at the building projects going on in Mecca today, I would say, well, not anymore. They're not there anymore.
Yeah.
Saudi Arabia, because of the lack of history of Mecca, they're cementing up and paving over all of the evidence, so nobody can ever find it again. When we look at the surrounding civilizations, none of them have heard of Mecca. Nobody has mentioned it in any of their writings. That is extremely problematic for Muslims, but nobody wants to admit it. If somebody outside of Islamic literature, outside of the Hadith literature, outside of the Quran, outside of the Sirah or the Taqrif, show me somebody, some civilization that mentions Mecca, the Byzantine Empire, the Sassanid Empire, the Roman Empire, anybody that
The
mentions
Islamic Empire mentions it. It's in this Hadith and Quran.
That's what I'm saying. Outside of them, it does not exist. And those, when were those written down, Lloyd? What do we say? When would we say that those were written down? 200
It
years
was with
after the fact.
Allah. It was with Allah before the creation of man.
Yeah.
A true story. True story.
If people were to correlate this with American history, I don't know if how familiar you are with American history, but we fought a revolution in our country about 250 years ago. This would be the same as having nothing but oral traditions telling us what happened in the revolution and using those oral traditions in order to teach our students today, our kids today, what happened for sure in 1776. That would be the distance, the time distance between now and the American Revolution is the same as the time difference from when the Hadith literature began to be edited and collected and put together as it is from now to the revolution, or from when those events happened for the Hadith literature. It's absolutely insane to believe that, but yet here it is. They'll swear up and down that you cannot second guess it, because why? The Isnads, they don't make mistakes. They memorized everything, don't you see? Stupid. When we look at all these other insignificant towns compared to Mecca, we have a ton of evidence for each of these. We have manuscript evidence, we have archaeological evidence, we have ancient artifacts, we have different mentions from throughout different empires mentioning those locations.
So you're saying it's just book knowledge, because book knowledge is not true knowledge. What you need is street knowledge, Eric. You need the feeling. You need that feeling. Book knowledge is, it's out there, but you need a feeling in here, Eric.
Yeah, these are a bunch of pointy head professors telling us what to think. I get that. Not a very good argument.
Yeah, I know. I mean, this is the nonsense that and sadly, I mean, this is what we're reduced to, right?
Yeah. The trade route theory is, I showed you how that's nothing but a bunch of bunk from what was the guy's name?
Yeah,
Uh,
these coins
remember
are
why?
the coin story, as the astronomer points out. The coins are a slam dunk on this as well. I mean, if you study early Islamic coins, there are none that were minted in Mecca for the first 100 years of Islam. Yet
Why?
it was supposed to be the center of trade, the center of the world. Civilization flowed from Mecca to the rest of the world. All were minted in the north and then the east. And
Um,
I would say also, I mean, look, there's obviously a heavy amount of evidence that indicates, I mean, we can show Islam, an Islamic like religion, and clearly a very close tie to the culture of Muhammad's tribe, etc., etc., from Yemen. We can show that. So very, very strong connections historically, culturally, and so on. And it looks like the Muslims were trying to erase that aspect of their culture
well, the
to,
earliest coin
to
that we have has a picture. I believe it's Marwa, and has a Christian cross
Muawiyah.
on it. Yeah, it has a Christian
Yeah,
cross on it. How's that work
yeah.
out?
Yeah, so
Um,
they don't want people looking at that. They went to Mecca because there was a blank slate, nothing there, no history, no record, so they could start with a clean slate and make up a fresh story.
that has more evidence for it than what they have for Mecca today. That we can show that, which
Yeah, not a
is,
single Ottoman caliph went on the Hajj.
I didn't know that. I did not know that. Okay, Ptolemy. We talked about Ptolemy, how that doesn't hold up. We talked about the land routes. It wouldn't have been on a land route. They just would have followed the sea. It doesn't make any sense to
I mean,
transport
there
stuff.
were land routes. I mean, I think historically there were land routes, but I wouldn't say they were. And they didn't go through Mecca, and they probably didn't carry valuable goods.
Well, they wouldn't. They wouldn't if you were coming from India. If you were coming from the Far East and you
Oh no,
were,
then you wouldn't. But there was a land route from Yemen through to Syria, for instance. I
yeah,
mean, that
Aden
did.
all the way up. Yeah, I agree with that. I do agree
Yeah.
with it. There was a land route, but this idea, this trade route theory that Montgomery Watts, where they would offload it in Aden and then transport it by land all the
No, no,
way.
that doesn't make sense.
That's bunk. They would kept it on the ship and they would have gone up.
Yeah.
That's the
Although I do believe that depending on the season, certain times of the year, they would go from Africa up that Gulf, and then there were certain times the winds were bad and they couldn't actually go by ship all the way to the Gulf of Aqaba. So they would have to offload during certain times onto land and then go from land up to Aqaba. So that did happen, but they didn't get off at Mecca for sure.
on which side of the Red Sea would they do
On
that?
the right hand side.
Okay.
So
All right. So let's see here. Food, water, towns. Okay, there's not enough water. I mean, we clearly demonstrate that. And despite the appeal to the Zamzam well, none of that holds up. So somebody somewhere. The bottom line is somebody somewhere at some point in time in any historical document would have mentioned Mecca prior to the 7th century, but the fact is that Mecca is not mentioned anywhere until 741. That is over 109 years after the death of Muhammad, and we don't find it on a map until 900 AD, which is about 270 years after the death of Muhammad. The fact is we have no evidence for Mecca in the 7th century, and therefore,
what are the earliest maps for Jerusalem?
what's that?
What's the earliest maps for Jerusalem?
I'm not sure. I don't know.
Yeah, but Jerusalem
I
is
know
uncontested. Everyone knows it's been there since the dot.
I would have to pull that up. Let me see here. There. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you just fine.
Okay,
Yeah.
there we go. Yeah, I needed to come. I've been having problems the whole show trying to understand. It's because I've been listening through my speakers instead of my headphones, like I should have been uh, to begin with. What a dolt! I wanted to show you one more thing, Lloyd, if I could, before we cut out of here today, and that deals with the destruction of the evidence by Saudi Arabia for Mecca. Let me see here. How would I do this? I would do it this way, like I did the last one, but just with a different show. There we go. Okay. This is a picture. I'm not up on the screen. Picture of Saudi Arabia today. What a beautiful picture, too. Can you see that? It's not on the screen.
Yeah, it's,
Can you hear me?
let me share it again. There we go.
There
Yep.
we go. Okay, yeah, it's a beautiful picture. Here's the Kaaba. Oops, let me get my laser pointer here. Here's the Kaaba. And this right here is the fourth tallest building in the world. Look at all the construction that has been done around the Kaaba. This is a $21 billion construction project to provide housing, apartments, not housing, but apartments, places for stay for all the wealthy people coming on the Hajj. Those people who are not so wealthy probably have to stay over here in the hills or in the valley in tents or whatever. But the people that got money, they can stay up here close to the Kaaba and overlook it and sit there and look down upon it. The problem is, as I showed you earlier, this right here. They have dug up the entire city. And by digging up the entire city, they've destroyed all of the evidence or evidence, period, for the existence of Mecca in the 7th century. And this isn't just this Kafir saying this, Lloyd. This has been widely published all over the
Yeah.
world. This is, Saudi Arabia blows over its heritage. Right here, never-ending
Destruction.
Yeah, Mecca.
Yeah, it's
I mean,
amazing that they would do so. I mean, they've obviously got nothing. And yeah, there's clearly nothing. But have a look at this, for instance. Neolithic homes uncovered in Saudi Arabia. Prehistoric dwellings give clues to early Arabian culture. If we can find this in Saudi Arabia, you think we could find the world's oldest city with a couple of buildings?
you would hope it would be there somewhere.
I mean, this is August the 2nd, right? Neolithic homes. I mean, when was the Neolithic period?
Oh,
Um,
goodness, you're
During
asking.
the 6th and 5th millennia BC. So
Okay.
6,000. I mean, these are 7,000 years old,
Yeah, yeah, that's
right?
impossible. That you have something that's old, but yet there you go, it's right there.
Yeah. So Arabia has massive amounts of actual archaeology that's only now being uncovered. But you're looking at, I mean, some of the oldest places I've seen like 5, 6, 7,000 years old. So there's evidence, but somehow Mecca, the world's oldest city, it's a lie. I think we all just need to stand up in a chorus and just say it's a lie. They're lying. They're lying. Liar, liar, pants on
On fire,
fire.
right? Yeah, but
The whole story of Abraham, Hagar, and Mecca and the Kaaba are just complete
I would just
fabrications.
ask
You know?
them to provide their own evidence. And they've written a couple other things. If you pull my slideshow back up real quick, they've written a couple other things that I wanted to point out. I mean, this is again, this isn't some conspiracy theory. It says right here, 98% of Saudi Arabia's historic and religious sites have been destroyed since 1985. Key mosques and historical sites from the time of Muhammad and the Ottoman era have been demolished
Demolished relentlessly.
relentlessly. The expansion of the Grand Mosque in Mecca began in 2011 with a staggering $21 billion budget. It's created a controversy, but activists say that this project and all other recent demolitions are part of a government campaign to erase historical and religious sites across Saudi Arabia in keeping with the Wahhabi doctrine.
Doctrine.
Yes.
But as
So
Armageddon News tells us, the problem is it is pagan evidence. We constantly come up with pagan evidence. Constantly.
that would be problematic. If this is supposed to be all, uh, it says here, and the historian in Mecca, its layers of history are being bulldozed.
What layers of history? That implies there are layers of history. And Mecca has never been the capital of an Islamic state. Muhammad and the first three caliphs operated from Medina, and then Iraq, Syria, Egypt, and Turkey. No one cared about Mecca. And that's a fair point, Tashvin. That's a very good point. Yeah,
Uh,
they have to provide evidence. They need to provide evidence
yeah,
exactly.
Villananus asked in chat, do I have any pictures of Mecca from the early 1900s? It's in the slideshow. If you email me, and I'll send you the slideshow, brother.
It's Eric the Kafir, right?
Eric Theckefer. I'll post it. I'll write it down here. Eric Theckefer.
Eric the Kafir. I'll try and share my screen in a moment. Eric the Kafir at gmail.com, right?
Yep, gmail.com. There we go. Eric Theckefer. Oh, wait a second. This comment has failed to post to Lloyd. Huh? But there
But
it's
like
right there.
this,
Yep, Eric the Kafir. Yep, Eric Theckever at gmail.com. Yeah, just send me.
yeah, YouTube will probably block it. Dad went through with me, so I was able to send it.
Okay, so send me an email, and I'll gladly send you.
Yeah, so we can find 7,000-year-old Neolithic sites in Saudi Arabia, but yeah, we can't find the world's oldest city.
Yeah,
But you can
that's
find this place. You can
problematic.
find this is 7,000 years old, and you can find that. But yeah,
Yeah, I have the last thing here. This
yeah.
article from, let's see, this article from, where did it go? Right here. Destruction historical sites. It says over 300 sites have been destroyed in the last 50 years. 95% of the sites, and 95% of the sites in Mecca have been destroyed. The place where Muhammad grew up has already been demolished. A library built over the house
No
where he was
way.
born. Yep. Now there are plans to demolish that to build skyscrapers. Too much evidence there left
Why
over. So
would
we
you
got to destroy
destroy
it
the
again.
house of your prophet?
And here's their excuse: we don't want people worshiping relics. That's the. I mean, I'm serious. That's their excuse. Then, if that is the case, if that's the case, then why don't you go to Medina and tear down that mosque built over the tomb of Muhammad? Shut up, you hypocrite! You aren't fooling anybody. You're purposely destroying this evidence because you know it does not support your history. He destroyed all these 7 mosques in Saudi Arabia itself. So the bottom line is that Saudi Arabia is, this isn't a conspiracy, folks. Saudi Arabia is purposely destroying and cementing over any evidence that would have supported a 7th century Mecca, but more importantly, the evidence that clearly demonstrates that Mecca did not exist in the 7th century. And again, if you want a copy of these slideshows that I have, email me. I have no problem sending them out to you. And I also, shameless plug for my own channel, Lloyd, if you want to watch these videos that I do on these things, you go to my YouTube channel, the Crossing the Crescent discussion group,
Yeah.
Crossing the Crescent discussion group. And we're live every Monday at 5 p.m. Central Standard Time.
And Sharon Kowalski says, not worship relics, but they kiss a rock. I mean, yeah, they literally kiss a rock. They hug a rock. They kiss a rock.
But it's different, don't you see? It's because Muhammad did it. And since Muhammad did it, everybody should do it. Isn't there
Right.
something where if you get like there's like a water pipe that goes through the Kaaba, and if you drink the water from that water pipe, that you automatically get your sins forgiven? Or there's something about a water pipe
Who
in there.
knows?
It's
So yeah, we need to change. So we need to start calling it macaca from now on, because the whole story is caca. Macaca. Because the whole story is caca. Like, let's be honest.
It's a bunch of macaca. You're full of macaca. Yeah.
You know. Yeah. So that, I mean, that is, look, that's pretty definitive. All of this together. It's there is no solid evidence for Mecca. They've destroyed the evidence. They've cemented over it. They've made excuses. If they had it, they would show it. If you had the evidence, you'd show the evidence. But there is none. I mean,
I really like arguing this type of evidence against Islam instead of it getting bogged down in, well, you don't read Arabic, and arguing the nonsense that goes in the Quran, or talking about the proclivities, the sexual proclivities of Muhammad and what a reprobate he really was. This leg right here of that 3-legged chair of Quran, Muhammad, and Mecca, this one is the easiest to defend because you can point out all the glaring problems with what you should be finding in Mecca and what we don't find. And as I said, everything points towards it being a different place, even in their own literature. If you're going to use their own literature, it points to a completely different place, and it simply is not the Mecca that we're told it is today.
yeah. So, yep. So this is so now, yep. So that is Mecca. I was planning to do a talk on Mecca myself. I've got some of my own notes that I've been putting together for a talk on Mecca. So I'll probably do one in the near future as well. If you want, should I invite you on for that, Eric? Because I'll try and do. I was
Sure.
planning to do my own sort of take on this whole Mecca as well. Because also there are certain issues. I mean, when you look at the Islamic story, which makes no sense, but so you start adding Hagar, you start adding Abraham, and you add the Kaaba into the mix. There is no evidence for any of this. Nothing whatsoever. It is sheer assertion. It is merely myth. There is no evidence. Seriously, look, that Muslims are on the rise. They're emboldened in the UK, in France, in Germany. You know, we all feel it. Maybe we cannot articulate it. Maybe we're not allowed to articulate it. But I think we can all feel it. You all know that something's coming, something's happening. So, yeah, we need to do what we can to get the word out. They've been playing a propaganda war. It's very important for them, and we can undermine that propaganda. We can destroy that propaganda. We have the facts. Remember, the benefit that we have, because we tell the truth, is that the truth has one version, the lie has many versions. When you look at the story of the Zamzam well, how it was created, an angel's wing created the Zamzam well. You look at no, actually no, it wasn't that. The heel of Ishmael accidentally was hit the ground and it created the Zamzam well. Actually, no, it wasn't that. It was a crow that came next to and it dug a hole. And actually, no, it wasn't that.
No, I
It
like the crow thing. Stop, Lloyd. I like the crow thing. I mean, it kind of the raven and Adam and Eve story that you can correlate the two.
Yeah, but there's multiple versions of how Zamzam well came about. The whole story of Hagar. There are multiple versions of it. They don't even get their story straight. I think the Bible has a pretty clear story. It's not like it's making 8 different versions of how, you know, Moses struck the rock. No. Moses actually played a harp. No, Moses actually threw a piano against it. No. Moses actually had a Bosch power tool and he made a hole in the rock. No. Actually, Moses and his friends took rocks and threw it against the rock. No. Moses actually hit it with a stick after having to chase it down. That's the Quran. The truth has one version. The Quran has multiple versions because it's not the truth. The Islamic narrative has multiple versions, and that's how we know it's false. Any final thoughts, Eric? But
Yeah,
this was fantastic. Thank you very much.
yeah, and again, let me just say thank you once again for inviting me onto your channel. I really do appreciate the opportunity to come in and discuss these issues that I have some coherent level of understanding of. And I wanted to add just one thing to that Hagar, Abraham, and Ishmael comment that you had made. When we think about the literal libraries that have been written by Jewish rabbis on Abraham over the centuries, literally, I
Mm-hmm.
mean, you're talking about huge swaths of information and writings in what is it, Talmudic, Midrash, all these different writings that we have. None of them place Abraham that far south in Arabia.
Well,
None of
remember
them.
they had to come up with the whole story of the Burak, which actually they took from poetry, which was written hundreds of years after Muhammad, right? They had to use the Burak as because the first person to ride the Burak was not Muhammad. The first person was Abraham, and that was the excuse for how he came from Hebron in Israel to Mecca to visit, to do day trips on his little magic carpet horse to visit Ishmael and play with him and then go back at night. That's where the idea of the Burak came from.
It's a
And
magic pony, the magic pony ride.
the magic
Yeah,
pony. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah, the astronomer says Muslims simply say that absence of evidence is not evidence of absence. Yeah, they've got these wonderful pithy cliches or whatever, pithy sounding cliches. But they don't know how history operates. You can have some evidence missing, but we have all evidence missing. So I'm with Eric. Yes.
thank you. I appreciate that. Yeah, and it's like I said, it's only applies if you're actually looking for the evidence instead of
Yeah.
destroying it.
Armageddon News says no history before Mo, no books before Mo, no mosques before Mo, no narrators before Mo, no traceable religious leaders before Mo, or any links between Jesus and Mo until Mo comes along and then suddenly, yeah. And in fact, hundreds of years after Mo, these things start cropping up.
No
Yeah.
homo. Sorry, not there.
Now, the Wizard of Wood says, my mind is blown with all this education. You're welcome. Thank you. There's lots of content on the channel, hundreds of videos. And yeah, if you guys would like, share, subscribe, put out the content on X, uh, you know, make little memes, make little clips, take little sentences, put them out, advertise the channel. Would appreciate that. And if you guys can let me know what you'd like Eric to talk about on the next talk, because Eric has some content. But if there's anything else you'd like us to discuss, I'm sure he and I could come up with some good
I
ideas
do
on
have a
various
question.
topics.
I do have
Yes.
a question for you. What is your opinion on the Shroud of Turin? Just real quick, 30-second opinion.
I follow the. I have a subscription to the Biblical Archaeological Society. That's $30+ a year because I love following the history. The historical evidence, the archaeological evidence for the Bible is only getting stronger. It is getting stronger and stronger and stronger. By the same token, we find that the old evidence, the old claims are falling apart. They prove to be false. They prove to be suppositions. Evidence, science, archaeology, history backs it up. By the same token, the Shroud of Turin, new evidence, new methods are showing that the old stories are false, that people did a haphazard, shoddy job of examining it, and it is becoming, I believe, based on what I have listened to very carefully, it is becoming more and more clear that there is something miraculous about the Shroud of Turin, that it is a historical garment that is not dismissed as easily as people did in the 70s and 80s because new technology is proving that the old suppositions were false. There is something there.
Well, that is a comprehensive, very comprehensive answer that I didn't expect from you. Thank you. Okay.
Thank
And
you.
the reason,
What
the
were you
reason
expecting?
well, no, no, I
You're
was,
expecting
well,
me to say, well, evidence of absence is not absence of evidence,
no, I
and
was, the reason why I raised that is because in October I'm starting a postgraduate certificate program with actually with the Vatican on the Shroud of Turin. I actually think it is the burial cloth Christ. And again,
agreed.
you referenced those C14 evidence that was offered up in 1988 with the Stirrup Project as some type of what has been presupposed as being some type of refutation of the shroud being a fraud, and how that evidence itself has been debunked is a strong word, but I would say called into question because of several recent findings that they've had on it. So, and I noticed the wizard he was on me about that, and that's okay, brother. I mean, you can go, we can agree on these details as long as we agree
Yeah.
on who Jesus Christ was, and I. But I would like
Yeah.
to talk about that sometime also.
Now, the evidence is leaning towards it being legit. That's my feeling. I've also looked at this very carefully. I've read a couple of books on it. I've listened to the evidence. I've read extensively, and I'm familiar with the controversy since I was young. I followed it, and yeah, it's the evidence is leaning towards it being legit. More and more archaeological evidence, solid, hard, literally rocks, hard evidence, is proving the Bible true. The Bible narrative is coming into focus, whereas Islam is myth. It is Gnostic. It is false. So yeah, guys, that's it from me. Eric, final word. That was a great question. Though.
That's
Thank you.
all I have. I have to run to get my granddaughter. I forgot.
Yes, to get his granddaughter, guys.
I was supposed to leave 9 minutes ago. She's going to kill me.
Okay,
But,
yeah. So guys, thank you very much. This has been fantastic, Eric. Thank you, and we'll be in touch. We'll be
right.
we'll be doing this again soon. Thanks, everyone. God bless.
Thank you,
Take
everybody.
care.
Appreciate it.